What if everything you thought you knew about power was wrong? What if power isn't about kings and armies, but something far more subtle, insidious, and woven into the very fabric of your daily life, shaping who you are without you even realizing it? Today, we're diving deep into the mind of a philosopher who fundamentally changed how we understand the forces that govern us, Michel Foucault. Forget the simplistic notions of power as something held only by governments or rich elites. Foucault saw it everywhere, working invisibly, shaping our thoughts, our bodies, and our very identities. This journey isn't just an academic exercise. It's an invitation to peel back the layers of our modern world and see the hidden mechanics of influence that define our existence. Prepare to look at institutions, knowledge, and even ourselves in a completely new light. Michel Foucault, a towering intellectual figure of the 20th century, didn't just study power. He dismantled and reassembled our entire understanding of it. Before Foucault, power was often imagined as a crude, top-down force, like a king issuing decrees or a government imposing laws. It was seen as something that someone possessed and then wielded primarily through repression, prohibition, and brute force. Think of it: a monarch on a throne, a police officer with a bat, a censor blacking out words. This traditional view sees power as a negative, restrictive force that says, but Foucault saw something far more intricate and, frankly, much more unsettling. He argued that this traditional view, while not entirely wrong, was profoundly incomplete. It missed the forest for the trees, focusing only on the obvious expressions of power, while ignoring its pervasive, often invisible operations. Foucault rejected the idea that power solely resided with a sovereign or was concentrated in a single, identifiable source. He believed power wasn't a thing that could be owned, but rather a complex web of relationships and forces that permeate every corner of society. It's not just held by the president or the CEO. It's in the doctor's advice, the teacher's lesson, the architect's design, and even the way we talk about ourselves. For Foucault, power is not just about stopping us from doing things. It's profoundly productive. It produces knowledge, truth, norms, and even the very categories we use to understand ourselves and the world. It actively shapes individuals and institutions in subtle, profound ways, often without our conscious awareness. His groundbreaking works, like Discipline and Punish and The History of Sexuality, aren't just books. They are blueprints for understanding the invisible architectures of our lives, revealing how power constructs our reality. The relevance of his work today, in our data-driven, surveilled, and hyper-normalized world, is more pressing than ever. So, if power isn't a top-down command, what exactly is it? Foucault offered several core characteristics that truly redefine the concept. First, he saw power as decentralized. It doesn't originate from a single point, but circulates throughout the social body. Imagine a vast, intricate network like the internet, where influence flows in multiple directions, constantly shifting and interacting. No single server holds all the power. It's distributed. Second, and perhaps most revolutionary, Foucault argued that power is productive, not merely repressive. It doesn't just forbid, it creates. It generates forms of knowledge, establishes norms for behavior, and even produces the very subjects, the individuals, who are then governed. Think about how the field of psychology didn't just study madness. Foucault argued it produced the category of the mentally ill as a specific kind of subject to be treated and managed. It created a reality around it. Third, power is dispersed. It's not a grand overarching theory that explains everything, but rather a multitude of localized, specific power relations operating at every level of society. From the intimate interactions within a family to the broader mechanisms of a national education system, power is everywhere, working through small, often mundane practices. This means power isn't about a big bad villain pulling strings. It's about the countless micropowers that subtly shape our lives. These mechanisms operate through various institutions, schools, hospitals, prisons, but also through discourses, which are ways of talking and thinking about particular subjects that establish what counts as truth or common sense. And finally, through everyday practices like how we organize our time, what we consider polite, or how we dress. These seemingly innocuous forces are constantly shaping our behavior, our thoughts, and even our most personal desires, often leading us to police ourselves more effectively than any external authority ever could. To truly grasp Foucault's radical vision of power, we need to look at his most famous illustration, the Panopticon. This concept wasn't Foucault's invention. It was originally designed by the 18th century English philosopher and social reformer Jeremy Bentham as an architectural blueprint for a prison. Imagine a circular building with individual cells arranged around the circumference, each visible from a central watchtower. The crucial detail? The inmates in their cells can't see into the tower. They never know if they are being watched or not. This creates a powerful psychological effect. The mechanism of the Panopticon isn't about constant active surveillance. It's about the potential for surveillance. The inmates internalize the possibility of being watched, and this potential gaze is enough to make them regulate their own behavior. They discipline themselves. They become, in effect, their own wardens. This is Foucault's genius. He took Bentham's prison design and turned it into a powerful metaphor for modern society. The Panopticon isn't just a building. It's a diagram of how power works, not through brute force, but through the internalization of surveillance. The prisoners don't need a guard constantly barking orders or wielding a whip. They just need to believe they might be seen. And that belief fosters a state of conscious and permanent visibility that ensures the automatic functioning of power. This simple, elegant structure symbolizes how modern power transforms people into self-disciplining subjects, embodying the very structure of the power dynamic. It represents a fundamental shift from spectacle and public punishment to quiet, efficient, and internalized control. The chilling thing is, Foucault showed how these panoptic principles have permeated almost every facet of modern life, far beyond the prison walls. Think about schools, hospitals, factories, and especially contemporary workplaces. These institutions may not have a literal central tower, but they operate on the same logic of constant potential observation and normalization. In schools, students are constantly evaluated, their progress monitored, and their behavior assessed against established norms. This isn't just about learning. It's about shaping compliant citizens. Hospitals monitor patients, categorize their illnesses, and prescribe standardized treatments, often reducing complex human experiences to measurable data points. In offices, performance reviews, surveillance software on computers, and open plan layouts can create a sense of being perpetually under the gaze of management or colleagues. Even just the possibility that your email or internet activity might be checked can make you think twice before doing something unproductive. These institutions utilize specific tools, pervasive surveillance, not always overt but often embedded in systems. Normalization, which establishes what is considered normal or acceptable behavior, thought, or even appearance. And examination, a constant process of testing, assessing, and evaluating individuals against these established norms. The purpose is clear: to shape individuals into productive, compliant, and predictable citizens. We are encouraged to internalize these norms and standards, to measure ourselves against them, and to constantly work towards fitting in, excelling, or simply avoiding deviation. The outcome is a culture where self-discipline and self-regulation become second nature. We become complicit in our own subjugation, meticulously monitoring and adjusting our own behaviors and thoughts, often without ever realizing that we are enacting the very power structures Foucault so brilliantly described. The problem isn't just external control, it's the internal supervisor we all carry. Foucault put further emphasis on what he called the gaze. This isn't necessarily a physical look, but the power of potential observation, the mere possibility that one might be observed. It's an abstract, pervasive force that modifies our behavior. Think about it. How many times have you tidied your desk because you know a supervisor might walk by even if they never do? Or adjusted your language when talking online, knowing it might be seen by a wider audience? This gaze encourages conformity, not just to official rules, but to unspoken social norms and expectations. It pushes us towards what is deemed appropriate or desirable within a given social context. The nature of the gaze isn't necessarily physical. It can manifest as internal voices, the nagging sense of, what would others think? It can be the subtle pressures from our peers or the expectations we absorb from media and advertising. In our digital age, the gaze has become exponentially more powerful and pervasive. We are constantly under the potential surveillance of algorithms, data collectors, social media networks, and even our own digital footprints. Every like, share, search, and purchase is a data point feeding into a system that observes, categorizes, and influences us. We meticulously craft our online personas, knowing that friends, employers, or even strangers might be watching. This constant flow of information, both given and taken, reinforces the feeling of being perpetually seen, leading us to self-censor and conform, often without a physical eye ever needing to be present. The modern dilemma is that the gaze has moved from a central tower to countless invisible eyes, and we are not just the observed, but active participants in the observation process, feeding the beast that watches us. Foucault wasn't content to just analyze prisons and schools. He also examined how power manifests in the most intimate realms of human experience, especially sexuality. In the history of sexuality, he challenged the conventional wisdom that power simply repressed sexuality. Instead, he argued that modern society didn't just silence sex, it actively produced it as a subject of intense discourse, analysis, and control. For centuries, talk about sex was limited, often scandalous. But then, from the 18th century onwards, suddenly everyone was talking about it. Doctors, psychiatrists, educators, moralists. Sex became something to be studied, classified, and managed. This wasn't about liberation. It was about a new form of power. Medical professions began to define normal and pathological sexual behaviors. Psychological theories emerged to explain desires and deviations. Legal frameworks were put in place to regulate who could have sex with whom, under what conditions, and for what purpose. These fields didn't just find sexuality, they created it as a field of knowledge with its own experts, its own truths, and its own mechanisms for categorizing and controlling individuals. Think about how the very concept of homosexuality as an identity, rather than just a prohibited act, emerged from medical and psychological discourses in the 19th century. This new understanding produced a new kind of subject, the homosexual, who could then be observed, diagnosed, and managed. This wasn't about saying no to sex, it was about saying yes to certain kinds of sex, in certain ways, while scrutinizing and pathologizing others. Through these processes, power shaped identities and relationships, defining what was considered healthy, natural, or acceptable, and subtly compelling individuals to conform to these established norms. It's a powerful illustration of how power doesn't just oppress, but actively constructs our very sense of self. Foucault's enduring legacy is precisely this. He offers us an indispensable critical lens for examining the modern world. His work isn't just philosophy. It's a toolkit for understanding the subtle influences that shape our lives. Recognizing that power is decentralized, productive, and dispersed, rather than solely repressive, allows us to see beyond the obvious headlines and understand the deeper currents at play. It makes us aware of the subtle ways institutions, technologies, and discourses influence our beliefs and behaviors. This awareness is crucial if we are to resist oppressive effects and reclaim some agency. His analytical tools, the Panopticon, the gaze, and the concept of the production of knowledge, are more relevant than ever in our 21st century landscape. Consider social media, where constant self-presentation and the pressure of likes mirror the panoptic gaze, compelling us to curate our lives for an unseen audience. Think about data collection, where algorithms silently observe, categorize, and predict our behaviors, guiding our choices and shaping our realities without explicit commands. Or consider the proliferation of wellness culture, which, like sexuality, produces new norms about health, fitness, and mental states, often subtly compelling us to conform to specific ideals. Foucault reminds us that power is not just about what is forbidden, but what is produced, normalized, and made visible as truth. It's about the silent coercion that convinces us to participate in our own shaping. His philosophy provides a crucial perspective for navigating the complexities of our hyper-connected, hyper-normalized world, urging us to question the origins of our knowledge, the sources of our norms, and the nature of our freedom. If you want to dive deeper into how these ideas play out in our digital lives, click on the video now